A century ago, the Home Secretary and Director of Public Prosecutions were grappling with the direct action of suffragettes. Today, both those offices are held by women. And just like the movement for women's votes, many other causes began as marginal and unpopular campaigns. They sent down their first roots into the stony ground of indifference and hostility. They were championed by courageous people from all parties and none, who braved abuse and ridicule, violence and persecution in a tireless quest for justice. 60 years ago, being gay was a crime, and it was legal to discriminate on the basis of race. 50 years ago, firms could advertise the same jobs with different salaries for men and women. 30 years ago, there was no legal compulsion to provide facilities for disabled people. Today, there are more openly gay people in prominent positions in public life than ever before. More people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds are in Parliament, in the media and business. And disabled people play a more active role in our society than they ever have. Real injustices still remain for women, for LGBT people, for Black and minority ethnic Britons, for people from poorer families and for people with disabilities. But if we cast our eyes back to well within living memory, we can see just how far we have come. These improvements have been achieved through free and open debate, leading to progressive democratic change. Collectively, they've helped to create an ideal, as yet still not fully realised, but closer today than it has ever been, of a public sphere where wealth, gender, sexuality, race and disability present no barrier to full and active participation on a basis of equality. A society where every voice counts. And when everyone has a say in the laws and policies of our country, everyone benefits. I've seen it during my years in Parliament. As it's become a more diverse and representative place, it has better reflected the concerns of all sections of society. And in my experience, women often bring a different approach to politics than do men. For women, politics can be as much about listening and learning from others as it is about broadcasting your own views and opinions. And that is all to the good. Because when there isn't just one way of doing things or one perspective on an issue, our understanding is enriched and we can achieve better outcomes. But today, the ideal of a truly plural and open public sphere where everyone can take part is in danger. A tone of bitterness and aggression has entered into our public debate. In public life, and increasingly in private conversations too, it's becoming harder and harder to conduct any political discussion on any issue without it descending into tribalism and rancour. Participants in local and national public life, from candidates and elected representatives to campaigners, journalists and commentators, have to contend with regular and sustained abuse. Often this takes the form of overt intimidation. Social media and digital communication, which in themselves can and should be forces for good in our democracy, are being exploited and abused, often anonymously. British democracy has always been robust and oppositional, but a line is crossed when disagreement mutates into intimidation. When putting across your point of view becomes trying to exclude and intimidate those with whom you disagree. Women in the 19th century had to contend with open hostility and abuse to win their right to vote. In the 21st century, it cannot be acceptable for any women or any person to have to face threats and intimidation simply because she or he has dared to express a political opinion. Sadly, that has all too often become the case. 100 years after bringing all voices, male and female, rich and poor, within our parliamentary democracy, we now face the prospect of our country's public debate becoming oppressively hostile and participation in it a risk which many are unprepared to run. We can all see this change happening, and I know that many share my concern about it. Just last week, the leader of Haringey Council resigned, citing sexism, bullying, undemocratic behaviour and outright personal attacks which had left her disappointed and disillusioned. It's a depressing coincidence that in the week we are celebrating the first inclusion of women in the democratic process, one of the most senior women in local government has in effect been hounded out of office. In our universities, which should be bastions of free thought and expression, we've seen the efforts of politicians and academics to engage in open debate, frustrated by an aggressive and intolerant minority. It's time we asked ourselves seriously whether we really want it to be like this, whether we're prepared to accept a permanent coarsening and toxifying of our public debate, or whether together we will take a stand for decency, tolerance and respect. Whether we choose to be a society in which we define ourselves by our differences, or whether we want to be members of a community of common interest. Those of us, the vast majority of all political persuasions, who want a healthy and pluralistic public debate, where civility and tolerance are the default setting, and abuse and intimidation have no place, where every voice counts and no one is bullied out of speaking their mind, have a responsibility to stand up and help deliver it. Last year, I commissioned the Committee on Standards in Public Life to conduct an investigation into intimidation following last year's general election. Their report makes sobering reading. In this centenary year of votes for women, it's finding that candidates who are female, black and minority ethnic or LGBT are disproportionately targeted in terms of scale, intensity and vitriol is a cause of deep concern. Such abuse risks undermining the diverse democracy which we've built in this country over succeeding generations. But the committee's report also points the way forward. It presents a credible plan of action to help build a more civil public debate, and I welcome its recommendations. All of us in public life have a responsibility to challenge and report intimidating behaviour wherever it occurs. We must all seek to uphold the highest standards of conduct. We must set a tone in public discourse which is neither dehumanising nor derogatory, and which recognises the rights of others to participate. In word and deed, we should never engender hatred or hostility towards individuals because of their personal characteristics. And we must not allow disagreements about policy or questions of professional competence to lead to vitriol and hostility. These responsibilities fall on each of us as individuals and collectively on the political parties. My party has already put in place a new code of conduct for all representatives, which puts respect and decency at its core. And we have proposed that the other political parties follow us in signing a respect pledge for all campaigning, and I hope that they will take us up on that suggestion. For its part, the government will act on the committee's recommendations. We will take action to make our electoral process more robust and offer greater protections for people taking part in elections. While intimidation is already a crime, we will consult on making it an offence in electoral law to intimidate candidates and campaigners. And because some candidates and their families have been targeted for abuse in their own homes, we will extend to candidates for local government the same protection which parliamentary candidates have to keep their home addresses secret. I can also confirm that the National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing will implement each of the recommendations in the report which refer to them. This includes ensuring a clear standard is set for the police when dealing with intimidation and online activity during an election. And it is online where some of the most troubling behaviour now occurs. Social media is one of the defining technologies of our age. For millions of people, particularly young people, it is the means by which they engage with the world, express opinions, and communicate with family and friends. In many cases, this is clearly a force for good. More voices can find clearer and wider expression. Campaigns can gain publicity and traction. Through the Me Too movement, victims of sexual harassment and assault have felt empowered to speak out using social media. But as well as being places for empowering self-expression, online platforms can become places of intimidation and abuse. This is true for children facing the daily misery of online bullying, where a smartphone allows their persecutors in effect to follow them home and continue to torment them even after school has finished. And it is also true for many adults. This squanders the opportunity new technology affords us to drive up political engagement and can have the perverse effect of putting off participation from those who are not prepared to tolerate the levels of abuse which exist. The Committee on Standards in Public Life makes a number of recommendations for action which social media companies can take to address this problem. It sets them a clear challenge to do much more to prevent users of their platforms from being inundated with hostile messages on their platforms and to support victims of this behaviour. The social media companies themselves must now step up and set out how they will respond positively to those recommendations. So far, their response has been encouraging, and I